It's the story of a young lady who rushed home to her father in the Bronx and said, Papa, you'll never guess, I'm getting married. Isn't that wonderful? And he says, all right. Sha. What does this boy do for a living? She says, he's an actor. He says, oy vey, an actor. You'll starve, it's no good. I don't want to hear. She said, Papa, go tonight and let's see him at his play. Maybe he'll change your mind. So he goes to see the play and she rushes to him at the end of the play and rushes up to him. Papa, what do you think? What do you think? And he said, darling, you can marry him. Because an actor, he's not. I am 85 years old.
I'm 81.
Going on 81.
And I'm 92, don't tell anybody.
I am 88 years old.
You can tell the whole world, I don't care.
It gets so that as you get older, you get applause for just walking upstairs.
I used to lie about my age for years. Now I don't.
I've been in show business since about 1960.
I still work.
Is this your floor, ma'am? Is this your floor, ma'am?
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Let's see, my name, Alan Rich.
That's a very interesting story, let me tell you. I was in a concentration camp. You never even suffered 1 minute in your life compared to what I went through.
Hello, I'm Ivy Bethune.
This is Harold Gould looking at you right now.
There's my Anna Banana. Come on, give me a Grampy Doodle, a big huggy bug here. Come on.
Grandpa, over here.
Kay Ballard in later life.
My name is Pat Carroll.
I was born on this mountain, and I'm gonna die on this mountain. And so are you.
I'm Justine Johnston.
His struggle is man's struggle.
My name is Betty Garrett.
Only babies die of croup. Rose died with a cold in her chest.
I'm Marvin Kaplan, still. Thank goodness.
You know, you're a pumpkin.
I'm Carl Ballantine.
You're absolutely right, Samuel. This is delicious. And I've been missing it all these years.
My name is Jane Keene, probably best known to the public as Trixie on The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason and Art Carney. I played Art Carney's wife.
Is that your real name?
No.
What's your real name?
I don't want to tell you my real name.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
And of course my name wasn't Connie Sawyer because William Morris changed it when I got to New York many years ago. But my real name's Rosie Cohen.
I thought it was a good name because I saw it on a bottle of whiskey once. Ballantine. Sounded show businessy.
My real name is Caterina Gloria Bolotta.
Benjamin Norman Schultz will not fly. You'll have to change your name.
It started as Raisa Isakovna Viktorovich.
While it was a dance hall, I was dancing with the ingenue. And as we passed the bandstand, I said to her, and I have to change my name. And the band leader looked down and said, hey, how would you like my old name? I said, what was your old name? He said, Alan Rich. And I said, I'll take it.
My real name is Bruno Giovanni Guidacciolo.
Mr. Lift, we understand you take Professor Donner's course at Valley College.
Yeah, creative writing.
I got to New York City And they said, you got to get rid of that name. You got to get rid of that act.
I started out with Gloria Kay. I thought, oh, that's a good showbiz name. Then I went to Kay Ballad. Oh, I sing ballads. So then Spike Jones said, why don't you put an R in there? Because people are always saying Ballard. And that's how I got my name.
There was this big prejudice against Jewish names. I mean, ridiculous stuff.
You couldn't have a Jewish name. It's not like Whoopi Goldberg today.
My name is Bruce Kirby. Lately I've added, I'm Bruce Kirby, a working actor.
Whatever it is you do in life, what keeps you going?
If there's some success and it's fun, that's what keeps you going.
I don't give a dang about billing. It doesn't matter to me at all. I was never aiming for stardom. I guess that's the answer to that.
My only interest in this was in the long run, in doing what I set out to do, to give work to your expressive faculties. And that's on the basis of a lifetime. Not to go in and make a chunk of money and then sit back by the pool or whatever you hope.
Age has nothing to do with anything. You got a talent and you've done it all your life. Why stop?
If I couldn't get a good part, I would do the understudy, and I learned that way.
If somebody said to me, we need a gorilla for the record act, I would say, please, use me. See? And I would put the gorilla suit on, go across the stage. You want to be an actor, that's what you do, right?
And I said, Mom, I want to go on the stage. And she said, well, don't cry, bring me the yellow pages. My mother went on. Theater, Catholic Actors Guild. You're Catholic, you want to act, call them.
I knew when I was 5 years old that I wanted to be a performer.
6. I was 6 years old. And that was when I started school. And I said, now I can learn the English language and I will have my career.
What's in there? The power source?
I don't know.
It's frightening when you decide on a life career or an interest at the age of 7.
I would grab my father's straw hat and do an impression of Maurice Chevalier, and then they'd smack me and say, learn how to do the dishes. But I knew I wanted to be a performer.
I don't think I ever cooked or sewed like most Jewish girls do when they're little, because my mother kept saying, go dance, go practice.
I come all the way from Hartford, Connecticut, and my father was in the insurance business. And he thought my mother was absolutely out of her mind when she says, I want to move to New York and put my 2 girls in show business.
It was my barber's fault. He used to come to the house and cut my hair. And to keep me seated in the chair, he would do magic tricks for me. It fascinated me. I liked it.
Ever since I was a child, I wanted to act, that's all.
I was gung-ho for the theater.
I'd go around the kitchen and do the dishes like Betty Davis. I would always impersonate people.
After 5 or 6 months of this, I start doing the tricks. And I start doing them better than him. And that was the end. I never cut my hair again.
In the local library, I had read probably every book there, including all the books about aviation. I had a great curiosity as a kid. And I stumbled into the drama section where I'd never been. And I picked out a book, and I started to read it. And it was a form I'd never read either. It was a play. And there was a little Cockney maid in it. And I wanted to be that maid.
I wrote plays at camp when I was 10 years old and 11 years old.
I had a teacher who read Julius Caesar to the class when I was like 10, and her name was Miss Steigman. And the kids catcalled and laughed and so forth. After the class, I asked her if she would read the play to me after school, and she did.
And when I was a kid, my mother took me on the ferry to see Fanny Bryce at the Curran Theater. And I became like the poor man's Fanny Bryce because I did everything in dialect.
And within 3 months, I had read everything in the local library having to do with the theater, biographies, histories. I read all of Eugene O'Neill the summer I was 13. Thank God I didn't understand most of it.
I remember my grandma and grandfather laughing, and all around them there was the theater was in an uproar. That hit me deeply. That I wanted to do something like that.
How can I ever repay you?
Well, you can start by getting off my toe.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
I was too fat to be a stripper. I was a rotten waitress.
I think Sinatra wrecked my life. I went to see Sinatra when I was about 12. He was singing with Tommy Dorsey. He made it look so easy. I said, look, if he can sing, I can sing.
And I just happen to love people, and I love performing, and I love singing and making them laugh, and I love being very dramatic.
My sister was 8 years older and was a brilliant tap dancer. That was the era of Eleanor Powell and Ruby Keeler and all those wonderful dancers. But I had to keep going to school till my mother thought I was ready to throw out there in the stage.
Dad passed away and left me as the breadwinner. I had to take care of that. It was me and my sister.
Within 6 months, I was working on the main stage, doing my first big play, Our Town by Thornton Wilder, which still, to this day, is my favorite American play. Went to New York in late August of 1950.
Being in New York was so exciting.
I was scared to death. But don't let fear ever stop you from doing what your heart tells you you must do.
When I was 17 years old, right out of high school, my wonderful mother gave up a perfectly good job in Seattle, Washington, and took me to New York because I had a scholarship at the neighborhood playhouse. I mean, it was a very courageous thing to do. She just gave up a job, had no chance of a job in New York.
I left teaching, my last teaching position at the University of California in Riverside. Then after 3 or 4 years, I'd always wanted to be an actor, and we found ourselves this close to Hollywood. So with my wife's help and the children's agreement, we were very tiny at the time, I got an old clunker car and drove in to Hollywood, took a room in some attic there, and started to, read for plays.
My play was accepted by Yale, but I wasn't. And I wouldn't let them do the play without me. I decided to go to SC. I went there to be a writer, to be a radio writer. I took the drama courses, and I was very lucky. I had a man named William DeMille, who was head of the department, who was Cecil B. DeMille's older brother and Agnes DeMille's father. Pretty terrific stuff.
I just read around for everything. Here I was, 36, 37, when I came into the business to do that, and I read around every small theater. I was able to audition and get parts at a percentage I think I've not realized since.
Mr. DeMille saw my play and laughed. He thought it was very funny, and he directed me in a number of shows. And there I acted by mistake because there still weren't too many men who wanted to act.
And then after a year out here in Hollywood, it looked as if I could work.
In the summer times, I worked up on the Bourse circuit as a singer, dancer, and if you didn't make much money then, you made like $75 for the whole summer.
I didn't want to come to Hollywood. I wanted to go find theater. So I took 2 years to go across country, and I think I played every joint and every vaudeville, cheap vaudeville house, and I sang and I danced, and I thought I was great. When I got to Pittsburgh, I worked in this nightclub. There was a guy, Gil Lamb, and he said, "You got talent. I'm going to call the William Morris office." And they sent a guy out, and they said, "We're going to take you into New York and groom you." Well, I was so excited, I couldn't see straight.
So, I started doing some comedy.
I'm back for the first, sir. Only the beginning, only the beginning.
I put an act together. In those days, there was a depression going on, and I got a following, and people would come into the nightclub to see me. That's how I got started.
Mabel Albertson had me read for Moliere's Doctor in Spite of Himself, and I read it with a Brooklyn accent. And she gave me the part. Katharine Hepburn saw the show 14 weeks afterwards. And Hepburn came up to me afterwards and she said, "You're Marvin Kaplan, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "You've done a lot of work, haven't you?" And I said, "No, this is my first job." And there was something about her. She was so beautiful. She wore no makeup. She was about 40 years old then. and gorgeous, lovely. I came to rehearsal and I was dressed like a schlump, and I see on the bulletin board I should go to report to MGM. And I was trying to get a job there as a page. I thought it was that they had called for me. It wasn't that. I turned over the card. It was a different extension. It was George Cukor's office. And I had an interview at 3 o'clock. It's now 1 o'clock. I went to Mr. Cukor's office. It was in the Irving Thalberg building. And I came there and he said, Katharine Hepburn is your agent. And I said, well, she said, she recommended you for this part of a very monotonous reporter, a trial reporter who reads back this very emotional testimony in a very dull, flat voice. I said, I have a dull, flat voice.
I didn't get his last. You said sit down something.
No matter.
May I have it for the record, please?
Sit down, Pinky.
That's how I started, was all due to Hepburn.
I was a replacement in the pajama game, Mabel in the pajama game. And I could dance. I was always a good dancer, too. And Mabel dances in that, and she does a high kick at the end, you know, so.
I worked all the theaters on Broadway. At that time, there were variety theaters. The Paramount, the Strand, Low State, the Roxy. I played them all with the act. And I did it for 20 years.
I played the RKO Theater with Bill Robinson. I played the Roxy with Carl Ballantine.
I was with Spike Jones and his orchestra for a year and a half at the height of his success. I thought that's what show business was going to be like.
You were
never
singing.
an empty seat until I left the organization and went into musical comedy and nightclubs, and then I realized show business very easy.
Then somebody said, why don't you try for the movies? Well, I did. I tried. There was no interest.
Were your parents supportive of you going into show business?
Not at all.
I said, you can't act, you're too ugly, too homely for this business. And they both were theater people in Europe.
They hated it. You got to be a lawyer or a doctor.
My father wanted me to be a doctor, and my grandmother wanted me to be a doctor.
Your parents say, what kind of a life is that?
My father said, I don't believe they paid you for that. You can't do anything. No, the support was never there. That was my first big check from Father Murphy. And he said, I don't know why they're paying you. Don't do anything.
They thought I was a fool.
They thought I was an enigma. They never understood me, never.
I never would have seen the whole world without show business, without my mother pushing me on there. She was Mama Rose. That's why when I did Gypsy, I could just identify with my mother. She was Rose.
No matter what I did, my mother would come backstage and say, that was lovely, dear. You know, you need somebody like that in your life that always thinks you're wonderful.
She loved me as what I was doing. She says, well, if you're not going to be a liar or a doctor, be whatever you are. And I was very happy I could pay the rent.
When they closed, he said, so now you have to go out and get a job, you bum.
Didn't say that you're a bum when you're not working, but that was the implication.
My mother was proud. She didn't know how to tell me, but she was proud.
I went with my sister while she was auditioning for a show. I was just there to give her a little moral support. And the producer came back and he said, what do you do? And I said, oh, I sing. Well, you know, at 17, you have all the courage in the world. So I got up there and sang without a piano, and who cared? And I got the job. Betty was disappointed. It started a little sibling rivalry. However, she got over it.
Take back your number. I number. What could be given? I venue. I number. Is that all I'm doing? I got more bucks now. I honor. I don't like my part. I like drums popping like a jumping jack. Oh, what
I started out at Priscilla Beach Theater on June 17th of 1947. And I want to tell you that was the happiest 10 weeks of my life. We ate, breathed, drank, slept theater all day long. We did nothing but rehearse, play. We were in a play at night, we would work in the daytime, we'd be rehearsing a play for next week. You got no sleep, who cared? You were doing what you loved doing. It was the most wonderful experience I think I've ever had.
I knew I wanted to go into radio at first so nobody would see my face.
I was 17, and I was a maid in George and Margaret. That's a British play, and I was just the maid.
My first job in 1943 in a play on Broadway called I'll Take the High Road, which wanted hither and yon but nowhere. Directed by Sanford Meisner, by the way.
My first job was a Václav Havel play called The Increased Difficulty of Concentration, long title. And Havel, as you know, became the president of Czechoslovakia, and is a wonderful playwright. And so we did that, and wow, I got terrific reviews.
My first real job in the theater was with Orson Welles' Mercury Theater. I was down there in the bowels of the theater, underneath the stage, doing noises like people running, and down with Danton, up with Robespierre, and so come dance the Carmagnole, and wait for the gun, and wait for the gun, you know, all kinds of street noises and screaming.
My first professional job was when I was in high school, the Moose Club in Ashtabula, Ohio. Isn't that thrilling?
Played a sailor, and I had one line. Really one line. And it was all the other guys were the sailors are saying, well, how wonderful or terrific, you know. And I said, I want to blow my bugle.
During the war, I sang Thumbs Up and V for Victory. That was the Second World War, not to be confused with the First.
What do you want to know now? How I survived?
All the actors I knew had worked as waiters. They all had jobs. They all had side jobs.
No, I never had to do anything else. Show business was my life.
I was in the brokerage business.
I was a bookkeeper at Warner Brothers. I was the worst bookkeeper they ever had.
I never earned a penny not being in show business.
I took a job at UCLA to fill in between. I did some teaching there.
I taught in the system for 9 years as a substitute teacher. When the show went off. The show went off in 56.
This is after you had a TV series, you went and became a substitute.
That's right. I became a teacher.
Well, we don't have to stay here and be insulted. Come on, Gladys, let's go get some coffee.
Oh, I'm sure Mrs. Bronson didn't... Alfred! Where are you going?
To the kitchen. Where else would you get coffee?
We don't get paid anymore. The only ones who get paid are the stars.
You never really make a living in this business. You just kind of go from job to job.
When the curtain drops and you have to go home and worry about the kids and the bills, whatever it is, and open the mail, oh man, how come this hasn't been paid? Anyway, did we put enough in the bank to cover it? No, oh my God. So, see, that's life.
I had to borrow money like everybody else.
Oh, you borrowed money?
Borrowed money, yes. And I finally paid it back.
Oh, I was worried about money all my life, from babyhood.
Bad times? Oh yeah, sure.
What I wonder about now is, not the hard times, but what made me think I could be an actor? You know, that's what you say to yourself, what made me think I could do that?
I just love what I'm doing.
Give me a band and my baby, and an orchestration for syncopation with a real sensational beat.
I loved everything I did.
Grab one.
Is this any good?
Anyone you want.
Okay, you want to put it... Do I
Take a look at it. Put it back in the pack. Got it? Now it'd be absolutely impossible for me to find that card in that pack, right?
Maybe.
Absolutely. Believe me, it would be. Have my word for it.
Whatever I do, I love it. Whether it's a little part, a big part.
Cheer up, Toots.
The role of my life was Ursula in The Little Mermaid because it allowed me to be evil.
If you want to cross a bridge, my sweet, you've got to pay the toll. Take a gulp and take a breath and go ahead and sign the scroll. Flotsam jetsam, now I've got her, boys. The boss is on a roll. This poor, unfortunate soul.
I always saw Ursula as a combination of a used car salesman and an ex-Shakespearean actress. Now, is that a hot combine or what? I loved that role.
It was Fanny and Alexander. To work for Ingmar Bergman was a dream come true. And even though nobody in the world knows that I dubbed that film, it was the greatest performance for me that I ever did.
Mothers-in-law is the happiest time for me, because it was so thrilling to know you had a job for 26 weeks and you took off and you started again. And then it was wonderful to have that recognition. People that say they don't like it are really full of it, because it's wonderful. People felt that I was a friend. I'd walk down the street and they'd say, "Hey, Kay, we love you, Kay," you know, and I loved that. I loved it.
The Man in the Glass Booth was Maximilian Schell. It was a wonderful film. I had 2 scenes in it, and they cut one.
If you fell down, they'll have shot you on the spot. If you did not, each day they would pile more rocks until you did.
And I kept dreaming that the 2 scenes would get me an Academy nomination. This is how actors dream. You know, in their own minds they think.
I did Gypsy a lot.
Gypsy. That is such beautifully written songs in the book. Everything is just perfect. Anybody that's handed that role, it was tough.
Gypsy was truly my favorite show, and the easiest show in the world to do if you have any kind of an ability. Really. It's the most well-written show in the world.
Vocally, that's the only time that Merman ever missed a performance. Her throat, every song was like an opening or a closing song. There was no rest period. You know, you couldn't coast on any one number. And when you got to Rose's turn, wow, that was so exciting.
Merman, no matter what they thought, greatness. Absolute greatness.
I came to New York and I found out the one you call your daddy ain't your pa.
But I tell you, just 2 years ago, I did something that I enjoyed more than anything I've ever done. Palm Springs Follies. It was such fun, and that show is unbelievable. Everybody is over 60, and they're wonderful. There was a cute little redhead that did walkovers and flip-flops and heel stretches. She was 85.
Somehow Father Murphy was very, very special. I think because it was Michael Landon. And I did the pilot with this one yes line practically, but I didn't think I was going to get anything special out of it or that I would be in any other sequence. And I went in with a little thimble, a little tiny dressy thimble for the casting woman as a thank you. And I started up the stairs, and Mike Landon was coming out of his office at the top of the stairs. And it was just so unbelievable because he looked down, put his arms out, and said, "Congratulations, you're a regular."
How old were you when you got that part?
Oh, I was already 62.
And how old were you when you came to LA?
I was 45.
The name Follies has such a sparkle around it, you know. It's so great that you're proud to say you were in Follies.
What did you do in Follies? What was your song?
One more kiss before we part. One more kiss.
Do you like to audition?
No.
Anybody?
To me, it's like a fun thing to do. I'm not tired of auditioning.
Auditioning is torture.
Would you like to audition first?
Audition? I've never been so insulted in all my famous life.
I don't mind going in and reading, but it's, well, yes, I do. I don't like it.
I don't like to audition because I don't think that I show off what I can do. When I get up on stage, something happens to me, or I get in front of a camera. But sitting in an office, I'm rather boring, I think.
Taxi, taxi! Sorry, no more fares today. I'm turning in the cab. It's overdue.
Oh, please, mister. Hey, he's a girl. What are you doing driving a cab? The war's over.
I never give up anything I like. Get in.
I don't like the process today for television. See, Gleason, it was like a show.
How could they book one guy after they see 200 people for the same part? That doesn't seem very fair to me. When I auditioned in those days, there were maybe 10 or 15 up for the job.
Could you believe there were over 25 character actors? It was a real cattle call. I didn't know that many were still alive.
I think of auditions as a social gathering these days. I walk into and I find a room, so many buddies. We're all there. They didn't even have to send for the 500 actors. They could have picked out one or two and they could do the job. But I get to hear some jokes.
They're old guys, and they're out trying to get a job, just like me.
For mothers-in-law, I didn't have to audition. That's why I got the job. Lucille Ball told Desi Arnaz about me, and so he sent the writers out to see me in Detroit.
Arthur Hiller was the director. Look how that name came up real fast. See, I know what's going on. You didn't read for him. You didn't audition. He just talked, which I thought was wonderful. Like we're talking now.
I came to California because of a television series that I auditioned for, a thing called McHale's Davy. With a lot of guys auditioning for the part at that time. And I often wonder how I got the part. And now I remember. The producer said to me, "Carl, get down on your knees and make believe you were shooting craps." I says, "Very interesting. I never shot craps in my life. I've been a horse player for years. I played poker, but never shot craps." So down I went on the floor, and I says, "Come on, 7," or whatever I said. He says, "Hey, good." Well, there were about 20 guys auditioning for the part. I figured it was just another audition, that's all. And I went home. Suddenly they called.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, sir, for... For what? For the citation you'll be putting in for me, sir.
Citation? What citation?
For my Purple Heart, sir.
Purple Heart?
I was wounded when the torpedo hit the laundry barrel, sir. Got it in the finger.
I finally auditioned for George Abbott, and when I finished my audition, he said, "Who sent you to us?" And I didn't know if that was a pan or a compliment, but he meant it as a compliment because he hired me.
I did audition for a show called A Funny Thing Happened to Me on the Way to the Forum, which is a very, very funny show. And the guy who was producing it at that time was George Abbott. I read for the original form, and the director said, "No, no, no, this is not a comedy part. Next." Well, 10 years later, he decided that it was a comedy part, and I did it.
Well, I was in Lee Strasberg's class for about 10 minutes.
The only man who maybe saw there might be some potential was Mr. Strasberg. There was a little restaurant called Child's was down on the corner. People like John Cassavetes popped in there, Peter Falk. All these people would go to this restaurant. And after they did the scene, they would talk about how they did. You could always say, when somebody said, "Come and join us," that means you scored that day with your scene. That was a feeling that said, I'm an actor. I become an actor. I'm not just anybody. I'm an actor. And that's a good feeling.
Mr. Strasberg pretended he didn't know me. He refused to recognize that he watched television.
Starring Marvin Kaplan as Alfred.
The professionals were really wonderful. You know, you had Ann Jackson or Eli Wallach doing a scene or something. And the young people that hadn't done anything would criticize prose like that. They'd say, well, I didn't feel that Anne really saw death in that scene. She was supposed to be facing death. I didn't see it. And you wanted to go over and belt them. It's so wonderful, you know.
They took so much time. You know, to sit there and never get up to do anything week after week, it drove me crazy.
I went to one class, and Mr. Strasberg yelled at an actor, and I walked out.
Strasberg paralyzed a lot of people. I observed a scene, I'll never forget, it was January, freezing cold. I mean, cold, the place is in a church on 44th Street. And both the actors, they were married at the time, are naked on the bed. And I felt so sorry for these two actors. And there are goose pimples everywhere. It's obviously so uncomfortable. And they're supposed to be simulating sex. It took forever. And Strasberg's comment at the end of this embarrassing thing was, he says, "You're not very good in bed together." And I said to Addie, "I think they're over-rehearsed."
Lee Strasberg say, you didn't become an actor to get comfortable, did you? You became an actor to act.
I picked up a glass and he would say, "You don't feel that glass." Well, I did feel it. I feel it right now as I'm talking to you. Cheers. You know, and I don't want somebody to tell me I'm not feeling it when I know I'm feeling it.
He said, all right, Bruce, thank you. Now let's try this again, and you do this using your own language. Say it in your own words. So I did. And then the class started laughing, and then at the end of it, he said, now you see, that's where you got to start. You got to make it yours.
His idea on Shakespeare was that the language doesn't count. What's important in Shakespeare is the situation. They asked me to leave. I laughed so hard.
Did you ever take an acting lesson?
No.
What about studying? Nothing too much.
Stella had some very good ideas, but of course when you worked with Stella, it was the Stella Adler show. She was on stage more than you were. She was lit perfectly. Now, Bobby Lewis was a very good teacher. I loved Bobby Lewis, and he was the most sensible of all of them.
I preferred Sandy Meisner, who Paul Newman and Joanne and a lot of wonderful actors studied with. And he taught me a great deal.
The repetition exercises, that's a joke. Has nothing to do with the reality of a scene or a play. Just read the play. The author will tell you where it is, and sometimes you can go beyond him.
There's one thing that I learned about from Michael Chekhov. Everyone's complaining about small parts. He said, there are no small parts. Not that he didn't give you that thing, there are no small parts, there are only small actors. He didn't give me that. But he said, how long does it take for lightning?
I would say to myself, now today, I'm going to stay out of the way of the lines. I'm just going to say the lines. And then I would start. And so help me God, something would come up and grab me by the throat. And I didn't have to push any buttons for my emotion to go by. I'd have to sit on it. That play is the star. Not the star, it's the play.
The work itself, when it works, that's the thing that you enjoy.
Hi, Dorothy. Sophia? You kids have fun tonight? Oh, did we ever. There's this sewing shop on 4th Street, and in the back they got this thimble museum I've always wanted to go to. You know, you could put in a thimble what most people know about thimbles.
What I do is imagine the scene, and I play everybody's part, and I play the scene as I go along.
I had never acted, and I thought there was a difference between life and acting.
It's a technique. It doesn't require genius or greatness. It requires knowledge.
Anybody could be a movie star, I think, really, if they have the right features and the right cameraman and everything. But I don't think it requires any depth, is what I'm really saying. A lot of people with depth do it, but I mean, it isn't required.
I only knew how to work instinctively. I had no method, I had no technique, no training.
You gain a respect for audiences that's unbelievable because it gets to be an electrical loop between you and the audience. And I could tell you within a minute or two which way to play the show for that particular audience. And I didn't cheat and I didn't change anything. I just knew what way to play it. It was the most extraordinary experience.
I also experienced the backstory. So if I have committed a murder, I commit the murder. So when I go in front of the camera, I carry all of that with me.
I memorize before I get in it, definitely, so that you can have some leeway to feel your way around.
Now, Lucille Ball was like that. She demanded you to work full out from the first rehearsal. And Art Carney couldn't do it because he just doesn't work that way. And she'd say, well, I don't know what you're going to do. I have to see it. I have to know. And she'd work with the props from the very beginning.
If I'm lucky to get a part, that's where I kind of come to life. That's where a different kind of energy runs through me.
Does my dad offer me support, encouragement? No. All he says to me is, boy, oh boy, oh boy.
If something is stupid, I should tell you it's stupid. What should I say? It's smart? Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
People say, you know, in the theater, aren't you tense? Don't you get tense? That's when you're relaxed. I don't know whether you find your other actors that you've spoken to say the same, but that's when things get loose and you listen and, you know.
The 200th performance of Gertrude Stein, I was deep into the first act, and all of a sudden I went, I didn't know who I was, much less say the next line. I looked at my hands, there was flop sweat dripping off, and I thought, well, if I walk off stage now, I'll never walk back on a stage again in my entire life. What'll I do? And then I thought, what did the doctor say do? He said, take 3 deep breaths. Really deep, okay, I'm breathing deeply. And then he said, jump in. And I said, 3 deep breaths and just jump in. He said, yes, you'll find you will not be very far from where you stopped because you've stopped all the process and now just kick the automatic back. So I went, and I spoke and I continued and I didn't know where I was, but I kept going. And I got to the end of the first act. My dresser was waiting off stage for me and I burst into tears. And I went down to my dressing room and the producer came in and stood in the doorway and said, well, Pat, I hear we went up. And I said, yes, I went up and I did the second act and I can't go up there again and I can't do it. I can't do it. And she said, don't just stop crying. She said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will go up at the top of Act 2 and I will announce to the audience you have taken ill and they can all go to the box office and get their money back and you will pay for it. I said, I remember the words.
It always is, and it always most certainly is an inconvenience being evicted. I know, and we were. Alice did not like it, Alice Stokely, and she said so. She said, who are you to be telling us that our home today is to be someone else's home tomorrow? And he said, I am the landlord, madam, that is who I am. And he was, and he is, and we are evicted. And that, as they say, is that.
You go through phases that you don't know that the people on the other side, like the director, knows as little as you do.
Here's another incident of how stupid, well, I hate to say this, how stupid producers and managers are. Now, I played every theater on Broadway. Now, he's trying to book me in a Radio City music hall. What does the guy say at the Radio City? Hey, can't book him. They can't see what he's doing. I said, they don't have to see what I'm doing. You pay me for what I say.
There it is, cleverly done. Together. Whoops, wrong room. Always I want to do good for my probation officer. Okay, you played around with the stuff back there.
Well, they always ask you what you've done. And you feel ridiculous because, first of all, they're so young, they don't do their homework. They don't know.
Sometimes you want to slap them. They're so ignorant.
They always say the same thing to you. Don't you think I know what I'm doing? If he's that defensive, he doesn't know what he's doing.
I read for this very dramatic role, and I read it cold, pretty cold. And she said, that was very good, Mr. Kaplan. Tell me, have you ever tried comedy? And I said, no, but that's a good idea. I'll think about it.
you're doing Tuesday with Maury. Yeah. What part do you play?
Lloyd Bridges and Dorothy Bridges, who are our closest friends, and Lloyd said to me once, I've got to change agents. My agent's not doing anything for me. So I said to this agent, how would you like to handle one of the best actors in town? And he said, who? And I said, Lloyd Bridges. And he said, his eyes are too close together.
It was very early on, and Cassie says, well, we'd like it for this part, but your eyebrows jump an awful lot. I think it might probably do too much with your eyebrows. And that's probably so. I don't know.
Mr. Gardenia was my husband prior to Mr. Parks.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. You speak up.
I was married to him before I was married to him.
I see. Can't say that I blame you for not speaking up.
Shelley Winters went, and, you know, she always goes like a bag lady. And she sat there, and he said, what have you done? And she opened the bag, and she took out her Emmy, her Tony, and her Oscar, 2 Oscars, and said, now you tell me what you've done.
Calling the House Un-American Activities Committee to order, Chairman J. Parnell Thomas of New Jersey opens an inquiry into possible communist penetration of the Hollywood film industry.
Are you a member of the Communist Party, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? I have not refused to answer the question. I told you before I will answer this question fully. Your purpose is to use this to disrupt the motion picture industry, to invade the right not only of me, but of the producers to their thoughts, to their opinions.
It was 1953, and I had a leading role in Studio One. Monday morning, I went in, and Bill Nichols, the casting director at NBC, says, Alan, would you come up to my office, please? And I did, and he said, Alan, we've decided to go another way.
I was blacklisted because I was a member of the Communist Party.
McCarthy was a senator. He set the stage for this kind of panic in the country that communism was going to take over. They were trying to find out if communism had infiltrated the movies to the point of being dangerous. And if you can find any place that communism infiltrated the movies, I'll give you a prize.
I was on the Theater Action Committee to free a black man named Willie McGee, who was lynched in Mississippi in 1952 or 3, I don't remember now.
I marched for unemployment insurance. I marched against discrimination and against lynchings.
When Larry was called to Washington to testify at the Un-American Activities Committee, Larry did what was not popular for anybody. He said, yes, he had been a communist, and so what? It was so stupid, really.
I wasn't carrying a bomb. I never hurt anyone.
The Un-American Activities Committee, a lot of these people were shown not to be very honest later on.
Was I a member of the Communist Party? No, but the publicity people of Early to Bed asked me if I would do a benefit for the Russian War Relief, I think it was called. Well, there was a headline in the Journal American that said, Broadway actress joins Communist Party.
But I met Dorothy Parker at the Blue Angel, and she said, I want to take you to a luncheon where John Garfield's going to be there. And it was a Voice of Freedom. And the next day, my name was in the Daily Worker.
I was so upset that I called Ed Sullivan, who I knew already, being on the show, and I said, I'm really a victim here because I know nothing about this. And he called up for me on my behalf and made them retract it.
I didn't know I was blacklisted.
I would go to one office after another for TV work, and people, nothing today.
They had a way of saying, oh, we can't use you, you're NG, which meant no good.
But I found out a year later that I was on Red Channels, which was owned by a producer and a director who were way over to the right. If your name was on that publication, which came out weekly, you didn't work.
That was a bad time in our lives, because I know Larry's heart was broken, because he wanted to be an actor.
The only thing that was hurtful is when I saw my friends like Marty Balsam and all my other friends playing in in television, and I knew I could do a lot better. That hurt me.
I missed out on a lot when the blacklist came.
He was a big star all over the world. He had done Jolson's Story and Jolson Sings Again, and he was reduced to really not working again in film.
I was able to keep working in theater, but I didn't get any more work in TV or radio.
And our kids were just babies then, and so they didn't get harmed by it at all, I don't think, you know.
I had a wife and a baby. I made up my mind if they didn't want to let me be what I wanted to be, I was going to beat them at their own game. And when I had enough fuck you money, I would come back. I sold thousands of dollars worth of toys. My second job was Electrolux vacuums. My next job, I had worked for a guy named P.J. Gruber and Company. He bought an art gallery from a Frenchman on 3rd Avenue and 50th Street. So he called me and asked me if I want to run the gallery. One day a woman named B.B. Dell came in. She saw a painting she liked by a painter named Irizarry, and I sold her the painting for $300. She called me up and says, do you have any more of those paintings? So I loaded the truck and I brought 6 more paintings up, and she bought all 6. And she said to me, anybody who can sell me those paintings like you did, I want as a partner. Why don't we open an art gallery? I made that gallery into a gold mine.
I think probably the first break I got was from Danny Thomas. I went in one day to a rehearsal hall and Danny was there and he said, what are you doing? And I said, not much. And he didn't ask me any questions, but I think he knew what was going on. Next thing I know, I was on his show. And that kind of broke the blacklist for me.
I'd come in 57 with a tour of Rhinoceros, and I thought, well, fine, I got my bearings and I would be back. Came back in 63. And by that time here, it was waning a little. And for some reason, didn't follow me that much. And I was able to do, the first show was the Hitchcock Hour. And went from there.
Maybe I've developed calluses, some kind of emotional calluses.
I did 10 pilots out here and none of them sold.
How do you handle rejection?
Not well.
I've been rejected all my life.
You know, I grew up working dumps and dives with pimps and whores and to be an actress and get rejected, that was nothing.
You just have to get over it.
In the middle of my act, I'm doing Two Gun Cohen from the Barbecue. That's way back, you know. And some guy came in, it was a gangster place, and he shot the guy at the bar. And the boss kept saying, keep singing, kid, keep singing. So, you know, if I didn't get a part, it didn't upset me. I'd been through a lot before then.
If you go too crazy and say, this part is mine, and then it doesn't happen. No, you kind of, I mean, I've seen, when I walk in, I say, what, all the heavyweights here, what the hell am I doing here? You know, but I say, if I don't get it, I don't get it. What am I going to do?
Come on, a guy gets killed at a bar, the 10 pilots, that's nothing to watching a guy die at a bar.
You have to be strong in this business. That's most important.
Of course, I liked what I was doing, naturally. You have to like what you're doing in show business.
Oh, you know something? I don't ever remember being discouraged. It seems to me it was so exciting. I just loved every minute of it.
You must never get that serious about being rejected because something better will come along.
In this business, you learn through trial and error the things that will help you and the things that are negative.
One of my worst times, I was up for a part in Up Front. I just had come from New York, come from the hospital in order to audition for it. I was sort of set for it. It was a part of Sad Sack in the movie. They said I was an insult to the American soldier. My performance was an insult.
I was a size 8. I think that's what really was a bummer. I bought a Chanel dress and I auditioned 3 times and someone just sent me a tape of the song I did for Mame. It was between Angela Lansbury, myself, and Dolores Gray. And I did the song, and Jerry Herman cried and everything. And the producer told my agent, you know, Kay doesn't look like she came from #1 Beekman Place. And so therefore, I didn't have a shot at it.
I was up for Annie Get Your Gun, which I would have loved to have done, but I always felt I was sort of done out of it by the agents because the studio wanted me to sign another 7-year contract and I wouldn't do it. And the agents said, stick in there, you know, they want you badly, so, you know, you'll get your way. And I didn't get my way because it happened that the agents also handled Betty Hutton, and Betty Hutton got the job.
And Funny Girl, I originated the idea of Funny Girl. I did the album in 1954 and sent it to Ray Stark. And he said, oh no, it'll never be done. No, The Life of Fanny Brice will never be done. And if it is done, it will be done by Kay Kendall. And I thought, but when I saw Barbra Streisand and I Can Get It For You Wholesale, it just left my mind. I said, that's Fanny Brice.
Now this was a good one. This was a spin-off on Anatomy, that wonderful
Grey's
show,
Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy. And it was the lead, a grandma. And I know they're going to get a name for the lead. This always happens. I get these calls, and then you usually go and there's only 2 ladies instead of over 25, because what we are, if they can't get a name, we're what they call the backup.
There's nothing else I want to do, so therefore I go back. I'm like the dog at the table that thinks next bite's theirs.
Nothing else interested me, really. And the ticking
What about the ticking?
comes with it. It's a question of what kind you want.
What kind did they have?
You want striped?
What is ticking?
You don't know what to. It's the cloth that covers the mattress and the box spring.
Oh, I must have ticking.
Yeah, oh yes.
You know, you do the best you can, and you don't quit. I never quit anyway. A man owes a car 20, 30 years, all of a sudden it's a classic. My question is, why doesn't this concept apply to people? I'm 77. Doesn't that make me a classic? Am I not a classic?
You're a classic ball breaker.
I'll quote Vincent van Gogh. He said, the thing is to produce and keep producing. And someday you will produce something more valuable than yourself.
They've often asked me, how did you hang in there all these years? Well, I can't say I was lucky, but in a way, I was. I never got depressed.
I just keep trying.
I believed.
Of course, I'm depressed at the moment, thinking, what am I going to do next? I guess every actor goes through that, thinking their last job is their last job.
Oh, the actual depression of no jobs and no money, that depression I went through.
Along about the 70s, I wasn't getting many phone calls. And I think every performer in this profession knows that feeling. Hello? The phone isn't ringing. Oh, what's the matter here? I haven't changed. You know, where are all the calls? Hello, agent! Hello, everybody. So about this time, my marriage broke up. I had to have knee surgery. You want to talk about, you know, poor old Job. I thought if I break out in boils, I'm quitting.
After the pilots and they didn't sell, I decided that I better do something about my life. By now I'm alone, my children have grown, and I'm divorced.
I was responsible for my career, not an agent, not directors, not producers. I was responsible.
And I just knew that this is what I wanted to do, and so I just kept going.
But I began to think, now wait a minute, I'm at a real down period here in my life. Am I just going to sit here and go, no! So I said, you're going to do something on your own. Make it like a big audition or something. Let people know you're still alive, you're kicking, okay?
I had some bad times for about 10 years. That's a long time. But eventually I got a good job, and that was a series, which everybody wants today, a television series. That's the only way you can work steady. And I worked steady for about 5 years on that series.
I began thinking of a one-woman show. Not very expensive. And I thought, well, who will I do a one-woman show about? I began thinking about people. Now, I was very heavy at this time. Maybe that's why the phone wasn't ringing. I never thought about that. I originally thought of Sarah Caldwell, you know, the conductor of the Boston Opera, and I thought, well, she's the right size. And then I thought about Gertrude Stein. I thought, well, she's very definitely the right size. And in 1979, we began rehearsals. We played 18 months in New York and took it 4 years on the road. Thank you, dear God, thank you.
I always told Elaine that I would come back. When I made enough money in the gallery, I called a lovely lady. Her name was Betty Geffen. And I called up Betty and I said, Betty, would you like to manage me? And I went up for Serpico. John Avildsen was the director. As I walked in, he said, there's a young man in the room sitting on a chair. He's going to say he has to put a dime in the parking meter. Don't let him. Pacino was sitting there. I didn't know who the fuck he was. So I said, I have to talk to you. And he said, listen, I have to put a dime in the parking meter. I grabbed him by his collar like this. And I said, if you move your fucking muscle, I'm going to put my fist right through your head. Now don't move, you son of a bitch. And Pacino went like that. And I got the part. My first part in 20 years. I get a call from Shirley Rich. Alan, I'm terribly sorry. Marty Bregman fired John Avildsen and hired Sidney Lumet. And Sidney is using all his own people. And I looked up Sidney Lumet Productions, and I walked in, and there was, you know, one of these swinging gates with a secretary behind it. And I said, I want to see Mr. Lumet. She says, he's busy. I said, not too busy. And I went through the gate, stood on his chair over his desk while he was on the telephone, and I said, hang up the fucking telephone. My name is Alan Rich, and I went through the whole goddamn thing. I said I was blacklisted for 20 years, and I want that fucking part. And Lumet looked up and said, you got it.
Mrs. Chris' question, I don't believe is material or relevant to the present inquiry, although I want to make it clear that Officer Serpico cannot be considered derelict of his duty in any way or guilty of any infraction of the law. Quite the contrary. District Attorney is not prepared to say any more at this time.
My first movie job was after I had been 10 years in New York, being on the stage, and I was in Call Me Mister, which I starred in. Louis B. Mayer came to see it, and signed me to an MGM contract.
Well, without a doubt, was Mothers-in-Law.
Maestro. How much garlic are you putting in there?
I told you this was a secret recipe.
Because when you're on television, well, right now people think I'm dead. And if I see them and they haven't seen me on television for the last 20 years, they say, are you still in the business? Then I get up and I do a time step and I say, yes.
I replaced Jane Mansfield on Broadway in Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter?
Was going to do a play called The House of Blue Leaves by John Guare, which has subsequently become very, very famous. And we did the premiere, and we won the New York Critics' Prize for the Best Play. And that was a great play. I never really felt right for it. I think that was probably a big lift. The Mary Tyler Moore people came to see the show out here, and Mary and Val and that whole production team. I was Rhoda's father. How can I forget it? Every time I get into the airport, people would call out, hey, Rhoda's father.
When I did Call Me Mister, there was a young man in the publicity department, and that was Norman Lear. And so when Norman was doing All in the Family, I was up for the part along with Seda Thompson. They went with Seda because Seda had just won a Tony. Seda didn't work out, so Norman let her go, and then I was next in line. So that was how I got All in the Family. And then it was sort of one step, you know, right into Laverne and Shirley then, when there was an opening there.
Pacino was nominated for an Academy Award, and I'm home that night with Elaine. She's watching the Academy Awards. And all of a sudden I look at my wife and she's going like this in front of the television. Next day, I called Betty Gibbons and said, Betty, I'm taking a half a page in Variety and a half a page in the Hollywood Reporter. I got one phone call. A guy named John Crosby at ICM. He calls me right in, sits me down, he says, you know, there's not much I can do for you. Hey, how old are you? 50 years old. Not much. I said, listen, Mr. Crosby, I can do anything John Barrymore can do, anything Claude Rains can do, anything Eddie Robinson can do. And Crosby picks up the phone, flips the thing and says, get me Joe D'Augusta on the phone at Universal. He was casting Beretta at the time. They send me upstairs to the director, I read, and by the time I get to the hotel, Crosby calls, you got a Beretta. I never stopped working.
The hardest job I ever had, really, was Molly, a show that I was starring in. I was surrounded by incompetence. The producer was a sweet man who didn't have money for orange juice, you know, and the director was nuts. He was one of the new style directors that they would do games before they would start, you know, let's call out numbers, let's get to know each other, and, you know, real bullshit. Eli Mintz, who was the original uncle in the Goldbergs, because it was a story about Molly Goldberg, he'd look at me and he'd say, "K, Misha Goyam," meaning they were all crazy. It was also one of the most satisfying jobs I did, if that makes sense.
You know, I never said no to an interview, but I'm freezing from fever. And the phone rings, and it's Fifi Osgard, an agent in New York. She says, Bruce, so-and-so wants to see you up at the agency. They're looking for somebody to do a Brill Cream commercial. I said, I can't go there. I'm very sick. I can't get out of bed. She said, Bruce, I understand you're sick. I said, yes, I am. I'm not feeling too good. I have fever and shakes and everything. I'm sorry I can't come to see you today. Cut the bullshit. Get out of that bed and grab a cab and come up here. And I don't want to hear from nothing. You just do that. So I go in and I get the job.
Go figure the game out. It's a tough racket.
Thelma Ritter told me she never watched Rushes because she would get so discouraged afterwards. She wouldn't be able to work. Some people are that sensitive, you know, they can't watch themselves on the screen. When you see yourself on the screen the first time, it's a terrible shock. And after a while, I got used to myself. Then they showed the preview of Adam's Rib. And I went to the Egyptian and saw it with a friend of mine. I just wanted to tear my part of the screen off the screen. I thought I was such an amateur compared to Hepburn and Judy Holliday and those marvelous people. And yet the audience laughed. They liked it.
At MGM, I was put into an office, and a little guy was talking to me. It was the guy at the head of MGM, Louis B. Mayer. He says to me, why are they sending you in here? They told me what you do. And I said, yeah, I do a comedy act. And he says, listen, if we ever get a part for a guy that throws stuff all over the stage, we'll call you. And I walked out, and I said, now I know about show business. I learned the big trick. They'll only buy what they see.
He wanted everybody to call him Uncle Louie, and he was big, dominating man who cried crocodile tears at the drop of a hat. He called me into his office once and lectured to me for an hour and a half about I don't know what. He just railed on. And everything he said, he demonstrated, like he said, it's not enough to have it in your head. And he poked me in the head. He said, you got to have it in your heart. And he poked me in the heart. I mean, he's outrageous, man, just outrageous. But he knew how to run a studio, and people loved him and hated him at the same time.
I did the Ed Sullivan Show many times. He never knew what I did. To this very day, he didn't know what kind of an act I did or what I did.
I was working at the El Rancho Vegas when the Rat Pack were at the Sands and shooting Ocean's 11 in the daytime. And they would come to see my show, and then I'd go to see theirs. So I hung out with them a lot. I mean, we would be up till 5 in the morning after our shows and go to the Silver Slipper or someplace like that. And you go out, and it was daylight, And you'd feel so raunchy.
When I read Crash, I said, this is a wonderful thing. This has got a lot of humanity in it. It's wonderful. And then when it came time to do it, I got a call from Bobby, and he said that we'd like you to play the father. And I had a certain thing in mind to do as my character. And I tried it, and it didn't work. I went to Paul Haggis. I said, just to say one thing that you need from me. He said, well, just when your scene starts and you get up, be kind of like a tough guy. Not like you're sick and not like you're anything but a tough guy. I said, okay, thank you. And that kind of started the journey in the scene. Pop, you okay?
If I could piss, I'd be okay.
And you say to yourself, what a crazy business.
Martha Graham had a way of teaching that was very almost mystical. One time she stopped rehearsal and Martha said, I just want to know why Betty Garrett, who was the worst dancer in this group, looks better doing that step than any of you. I'll tell you why. Because she loves it.
I was in a play with Claude Rains for 7 months on Broadway, and I was in the top cell playing Prisoner 202, and I watched Claude every single night when he held on to the bars of his prison and said, as a boy, I used to study the stars. And every time he said it, I cried.
Larry Parks and I, my husband who starred in the Jolson story, he and I loved working together. Some married couples don't enjoy it, but we just had such a ball when we would come off the stage from a scene where there was just line, laugh, and we'd come off and go like this, you know, so hey, wasn't that fun?
I was Pat Carroll, Seal Cabot. I was so fortunate, really, to grow up with a group of people that were just class.
I got a job, a 3-day job on a picture at MGM. It was with Clark Gable, and I made a terrible mistake. I was wandering around, and I wandered into his dressing room. He had false teeth. And he's this American sex symbol. My sister would die to say hello to him. And I started to laugh, and I couldn't stop. And then I had to do the sing with him. He hated me.
I happen to love today's comedy. I love Saturday Night Live. I love everyone on it. And I think they should do a show about Saturday night still alive.
Did a movie with Debbie Reynolds. Now there's a girl who loves to act. You can't get her off the stage. Get her on, she can be on there for hours.
She was not a terribly nice person, I'm sorry to say. This man had worked in the orchestra with her the whole time we were out of town and everything. He was slow on her entrance music one time. And, oh, he's not going to be here tomorrow. And the audience laughed like she was making a joke, but she fired him that night. Oh, yes. Yeah, she's a head chopper off her.
Jerry Lewis still owes me a dress suit. We worked outdoor theaters, and it's pouring rain, and somewhere in Colorado, there's 30,000 people out there watching us. It's Carl, he says, you got to get out there and warm this audience up. I went out there, did my act, soaked the suit. He says, don't worry, I'll get you a new suit. Well, that was 25 years ago. I'm still waiting for it.
Working with Woody Allen, we did Love and Death. We were in Paris, and they had to make this forest out of snow and cold, and they had to have the fire companies come in and, you know, put foam all over the trees and so forth. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and we're huddled over a little fire and so, and Woody's got, you know, a blanket at his glasses, and we're kind of holding a cup of coffee, and he looks at me, you know, and he says, "Tough dollar, huh?"
I had worked with Jackie Gleason in vaudeville. He was a wonderful actor, and so was Art Carney.
You poor fool. Here, look at this. Just look at this. Norton sent this to Alice.
What?
What are you laughing at? Don't you realize the seriousness of this? I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. What are you doing with my wife?
They both could do dramatic parts just as well as the funny stuff. True artists can do that. Lucy was afraid to do that because she was offered Sweet Bird of Youth. I was in the dressing room when Pan Berman called her, and she's, oh no, nobody would, my public wouldn't believe me in that part.
I got to audition for a play going around with Gloria Swanson called A Goose for the Gander. Well, I had never seen Gloria Swanson. She was a bit before my time, though rumors may say otherwise. And when Miss Swanson came in, she was wearing a conical hat with a coif under her neck, and she was entirely in red, white, and blue. I thought, that is the most glamorous person I've ever seen in my life. I was playing a telegram girl. One night I went up in my lines, and Miss Swanson saved me. She threw me the line. And I went to her afterwards to thank her. She never spoke to us directly. She'd always call the stage manager over like he was an interpreter. And she said, Mr. So-and-so, would you kindly tell Miss Carol I thank her for her thanks, but tell her to check up on her lines before she goes on stage tomorrow night.
Do not even attempt to go into show business unless you understand that it's a world of rejection. But when it's not, it's wonderful.
Everything is the same, except new actors. And where do the new actors come from? From relatives.
Now there are three categories of actors. The first category is a very tiny category. It's the children of the stars. The doors are open for them. Then there's the second category, like my friend Milton Berle. His mother pushed him. She wanted to be an actor, and she was going to make sure that he was going to become a star at 5 years old. As a matter of fact, Milton told me a story about his mother. He said she went on this audition, and she said this guy is looking at actors, and he says audition time. So she went up there, and she walked in with Milton, and the guy said, Mrs. Burrow, we're looking for dogs. She said, bark, Milton, bark!
It's a chancy business, chancier than ever now.
In the business of show business, who do you know? That'll get you in quicker than, hey, what a great act you are. That'll do it faster. Because, you know, you don't have to be a great actor to work steady. I found that out. Although I'm not speaking for myself.
You have to keep working at something. You know, you have to work at your trade, but you also have to pay the bills. Give yourself a time limit. If nothing happens, say in 5 years or something, you should look somewhere else.
Keep going, don't stop. Why stop doing what you love doing? Just keep going.
No, young man, no. I am not a hero. No, I did what I had to do because it was the right thing to do.
Try not to be like the other guy. If you have something individual, play it up. Eventually it'll say, hey, that's pretty good. And it will catch on.
Get yourself hooked up with some kind of group or workshop or something where you're working all the time on your craft.
Do as many plays as you can, as many shows as you can, wherever, off Broadway, on the moon, any place.
Read. Read everything you can lay your hands on, mainly Shakespeare.
And keep learning something. That, for everybody. I don't care if it's in the theatrical profession, in life. When you stop learning, you stop living.
Get dressed.
Get dressed.
How's it look?
Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Carl Ballantine.
I still haven't done what I want to do, even at this age, which is really ridiculous. But I keep thinking, well, you know, I'm still a phone call away from being hot again.
Right now I'm working on a musical. I'm writing a musical, the book and the lyrics of a musical.
I just submitted some material for the actors, for the writers group at the Actor Studio, and they accepted me.
My name is Alan Rich. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I've written a book.
I hope very soon to do, at my workshop, do a musical review, an evening of music of just my songs. It's a very egotistical thing to do, but I think I've lived long enough to be able to toot my own horn.
Get out of her path, these dancing halls, most every night they have a ball. People come with just a chance.
Oh, I do take the next job that comes along, if it's on camera, off camera.
I would love someone to give me a shot at something like Doubt.
I've worked all my life to try to get diversity, to try to get multicultural inclusion. I had 4 committees at the union that I was chairing, at Actors Equity Association. I was chairing ethnic minorities, women, disabilities, and seniors. We're going to have a diversity celebration. And finally it has come here to the East-West Players.
What most actors forget is when the show closes, we're not actors anymore. The show has closed, which is a kind of sad thing.
I've done it the way I wanted to do it, and been very lucky, I think.
It's like, I don't know if this is the right word, but destiny, I think, motivated everything I did. I don't think I said, today I'm going to get up and get this job. I don't think I ever did that.
If I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't do anything else. I would do exactly what I've done.
You know, when people say, oh, you're not married, you don't have kids, oh. Don't feel sorry for me, I'm thrilled. Because I honestly believe that if you want children, they must come first. My puppies come first.
I just love to act, that's all. Born for it, I guess.
You know, that's the way career ends. When she said, you struggled 20 years, you suffered. And was it all worth it? And as the curtain is going up for his first big part, he says, yes, it was. And yes, it is.
And I even like to think of myself as a work in progress.
Stick to it. Don't give up. And if they tell you the business is hard, sure it's hard. But if this is what you want to do, you just stick to it and you just stay in it and keep doing. And don't be ashamed to do Z if you can't get A, because it keeps your instrument alive and it keeps you working.
Any more questions?